At my graduation celebration, I watched my dad sneak powder into my champagne glass, so I rose, smiling, and handed it to my sister. She drank what was intended for me. Can you imagine the terror of celebrating the biggest day of your life, only to realize your own father was trying to poison you? My name is Daniel, and that's exactly what happened at my college graduation party. I watched, my heart stopped, as my dad, Joseph Harris, slipped a white powder into my champagne glass, convinced no one was looking. What the hell happened next? Well, strap in, because this is the story of how I survived my parents' betrayal and found a strength I never knew I had. To truly understand why my parents would even think of harming me, you need to know about our family. The Harrises, we were definitely not your typical loving household. My father, Joseph, built Harris Pharmaceuticals from a tiny research lab into a multi-billion-dollar empire. His reputation? Legendary. Ruthless. Competitors would mysteriously lose funding or face unexpected regulatory hurdles, yet somehow, he maintained this perfect public image of a philanthropist and family man. My mother, Eleanor, came from old money. Generations of pharmaceutical development in her family before she married my father and merged their companies. She was utterly obsessed with appearances, with the Harris legacy. Our house was straight out of architectural magazines, and her charity galas were the absolute talk of Chicago society. But behind those closed doors, she was cold, calculating, and constantly critiquing every single thing about me. Then there was my sister, Sophia. 3 years older, straight A's, captain of the debate team, and later a Harvard Business School grad with honors. She joined the family company without a second thought, quickly becoming the heir apparent. Our parents never missed her tennis matches or piano recitals. They proudly displayed her trophies. When she spoke at dinner, they listened, rapt. My experience was dramatically different. Even as a straight-A student myself, my achievements were always met with chilling indifference. "That's what we expect from a Harris," my father would mumble, not even bothering to look up from his newspaper. When I won the state science fair in 10th grade, my mother simply commented that my hair looked messy in the photos. They only ever attended my events if it would have looked suspicious to others if they hadn't. From childhood, my future was mapped out. Pharmaceutical sciences, the family business. I'd run the research division while Sophia handled the business side. My protests? Completely ignored. When I developed an interest in environmental science in high school, especially how pharmaceutical waste affects ecosystems, my father dismissed it as tree-hugger nonsense. So, junior year, I secretly applied to Northwestern, specifically for their environmental science program. The confrontation that followed was explosive. My father threatened to cut me off financially. My mother cried about family duty and tradition. But for once, I stood my ground. I argued that I could still make a difference without following their exact path. After weeks of silent treatment, they finally relented, but with conditions. They'd pay for my education, but I had to minor in biochemistry and work summer internships at their company. College brought a sliver of freedom, but the tension escalated every year. Every holiday break was filled with passive-aggressive comments about my phase and how I'd eventually come to my senses. The pressure intensified my junior year. They started sending me job descriptions for positions in their research department. When I secured an internship with an environmental nonprofit instead, they threatened to stop paying my tuition. I swallowed my pride, took out loans for my final year, rather than give in. What they didn't know, until very recently, was that my maternal grandmother, Eleanor's mother, had left me a significant inheritance in a trust. It would become accessible when I turned 23 or graduated, whichever came last. Grandma Lillian had been the only family member who truly supported my independence. She was a brilliant chemist herself, but had been forced to work in her husband's shadow. Before she passed away when I was 16, she made me promise to follow my own path. My parents stumbled upon the inheritance only 3 months before my graduation, when their attorney accidentally mentioned it during a family business meeting. Sophia later told me our father had turned white with rage. The trust was ironclad, set up with independent trustees, and would give me complete financial independence. We're talking approximately $12 million that would have gone to them if I had never graduated, or if I died before receiving it. The months leading up to graduation were strangely, eerily quiet. My parents stopped their usual barrage of texts and calls about job interviews at their company. Instead, they suddenly took this intense interest in my graduation plans. My mother even called to say they wanted to throw me a proper celebration befitting a Harris. Their sudden change in behavior? That should have been my very first warning sign. The morning of graduation dawned bright and clear, a perfect May day in Chicago. I stood in front of my apartment mirror, adjusting my cap, a mix of pride and anxiety swirling in my stomach. For years of hard work, a 3.9 GPA, and I had deliberately charted a course away from my family's legacy. I had done it. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Car service will pick you up at 9:30. Do not be late. I met my parents outside the auditorium. My father was already glued to his phone, checking emails, while my mother scrutinized my appearance. Could you not have done something more with your hair? She asked, by way of greeting. The photographer will be taking family portraits later. No congratulations. No pride. Just criticism. Sophia stood slightly apart, giving me a small, supportive smile. Danielle. The voice of my best friend, Taylor, cut through the tension. She rushed over, her own graduation gown fluttering, with our other close friend, Zoe, right behind her. They had been my lifeline throughout college, the family I had chosen for myself. We made it. Taylor hugged me tightly, whispering, "Your parents still look like they smell something bad whenever they see you." "Some things never change," I whispered back. As my friends chatted excitedly about the ceremony and our plans to share an apartment, I noticed my parents step aside for what looked like an intense conversation. I couldn't hear most of it, but my father's words drifted over. "We need to solve this problem today before it gets out of hand." My mother nodded grimly, then caught me watching them. Her face immediately transformed into that practiced social smile. "Darling, we should find our seats. The ceremony will be starting soon." The graduation ceremony itself passed in a blur of speeches, names being called, and the incredibly satisfying weight of the diploma in my hand. When Danielle Elizabeth Harris, summa cum laude, echoed through the auditorium, I heard Taylor and Zoe cheering wildly. My parents applauded politely, their expressions utterly unreadable. Afterward, the car service whisked us to the Peninsula Chicago. My parents had rented the entire rooftop terrace for my graduation celebration. I was stunned by the sheer extravagance: ice sculptures, champagne fountains, gourmet catering stations, even a small orchestra playing in the corner. Fresh flowers covered every surface, and a professional photographer circulated among the early guests. "Quite the production your parents have put on," commented Dr. Lewis, approaching me with a glass of water. He'd been my father's research partner decades ago before splitting off to teach at Northwestern. He'd become something of a mentor to me, one of the few connections to my family's world that I actually valued. "Congratulations on your impressive achievement, Danielle." "Thank you," I said. "It's a bit much, isn't it?" Not really their style. At least, not for me. I scanned the growing crowd. Actually, I'm surprised by the guest list. Half these people I barely know. Dr. Lewis followed my gaze to where my father was speaking with two men in expensive suits. "Business associates," he explained. "And over there with your mother, that's Gerald Thorne, your family's attorney." He lowered his voice. "Things have been tense at the company lately. Rumors of irregularities in some clinical trials. Your father has been in closed-door meetings for weeks." My stomach tightened. "What kind of irregularities?" He shook his head. "Nothing concrete, but be careful, Danielle. Your parents seem—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Particularly invested in keeping the Harris legacy intact right now." As the party reached full swing, I noticed something odd. My parents were watching me constantly, not with pride or even their usual disappointment, but with a calculating intensity that made my skin crawl. Whenever I moved to a new conversation group, one of them would casually reposition themselves to keep me in their line of sight. Sophia sidled up beside me as I grabbed an hors d'oeuvre. "Something weird is going on," she murmured. "Dad asked me 3 times if you'd mentioned your plans after graduation." And Mom keeps checking her watch like she's waiting for something. Before I could respond, my father clinked his glass, signaling for attention. In 15 minutes, we will have a special champagne toast to the graduate, he announced, his businessman's smile firmly in place. Everyone make sure you have a glass for the occasion. I watched as waiters began preparing flutes on silver trays. My father beckoned to the head waiter, pointing out a specific bottle of champagne with a gold label. That one, I heard him say, for the family only. With 15 minutes until the toast, I excused myself to use the restroom. The main facilities had a line, so I slipped down a service corridor to use an employee restroom I'd noticed earlier. As I approached, I heard angry whispers coming from around the corner. Are you absolutely certain this is necessary? My mother's voice was tense, slightly higher than normal. Do you want to lose everything we've built? My father hissed back. The FDA investigation is gaining momentum. If they find those test results, we are finished. The trust gives her enough money to be completely independent. What if she decides to play environmental crusader and exposes the river contamination from the West facility? She has always been self-righteous enough to do it. But drugging her at her own graduation party, Joseph? We could just talk to her again. Talk? Like that has ever worked with her. She is stubborn and naive. It is just enough to make her sick, not to kill her. She will be hospitalized for a few days with what looks like food poisoning. That gives us time to handle the paperwork and move some assets before the trust disbursement. The lawyers confirmed if she dies before the official transfer next week, it reverts to us as her next of kin. Keep your voice down, my mother whispered harshly. Someone could hear us. My blood turned to ice. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. They were planning to poison me. My own parents. The realization was so monstrous, my mind initially rejected it. But the biochemist in me processed my father's words clinically, just enough to make her sick. A non-lethal dose of something that would present as food poisoning, but serious enough for hospitalization. I slipped back down the corridor before they could discover me, my hands shaking so badly I could barely check my makeup in the main bathroom mirror. I needed to appear normal. I needed to think clearly. Years of navigating my parents' emotional manipulation had taught me to compartmentalize, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. Back at the party, I observed with new, terrifying eyes as waiters arranged champagne flutes on a special tray. My father approached, examining the glasses carefully before selecting one and placing it slightly apart from the others. The special bottle with the gold label was opened, and the bartender began filling glasses. My father hovered nearby, ensuring he knew exactly which glass was which. I made my way to Taylor and Zoe, keeping my voice steady through sheer will. I need you to do something for me. No questions asked, I whispered. Taylor immediately nodded, always loyal, without hesitation. Record the toast on your phone. Get my father in the frame as much as possible, especially when he hands out the champagne. Is everything okay? Zoe asked, her eyes filled with concern. Just a precaution, I replied, forcing a smile. Family drama as usual. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. My biochemistry training kicked in. What would my father use? It would need to be difficult to detect, something that could plausibly occur naturally or appear to be food poisoning. Perhaps a compound from their own research facilities, something not yet on standard toxicology screens. I would need to recognize the symptoms quickly if his plan succeeded. Nausea and vomiting would be likely first signs, followed by perhaps abdominal pain, dizziness, or respiratory issues, depending on the toxin. If I could identify it quickly enough, I could tell medical personnel exactly what to test for. As my father called everyone together for the toast, I realized with crystal clarity I needed evidence. If I simply refused the champagne, they would try again another way. I needed proof of their attempt, something concrete that couldn't be explained away. The moment of the toast approached with a surreal quality. Waiters distributed champagne to the general guests, while my father personally handled the glasses from this special bottle. The family should have the finest champagne for this special occasion, he announced jovially to nearby guests. He handed glasses to my mother, then Sophia, then extended one specifically to me, his eyes meeting mine with a smile that never reached them. I watched in slow motion as he presented the glass, and with absolute certainty, I saw a slightly cloudy quality at the bottom, where a powder hadn't fully dissolved. My father's large signet ring glinted as he held the stem, practically forcing the glass into my hand. To Danielle, he said loudly, raising his own glass, "May your future be everything you deserve." The double meaning was not lost on me as I accepted the poisoned champagne, careful not to let it touch my lips as the guests took their first sip. Before we drank, my mother interjected smoothly, "Joseph, why don't you say a few words about our daughter on this special day?" My father cleared his throat, shifting into his public speaking persona. "Danielle has always been determined," he began, carefully selecting words that sounded complimentary to outsiders, but carried years of disapproval that only I could hear. "While she has chosen an unconventional path, today we celebrate her academic achievement." As he continued his passive-aggressive speech, my mind raced. Taylor was recording as promised, her phone discreetly capturing everything. I needed to act now, before the toast concluded. The champagne in my hand might as well have been a live grenade. "And to Sophia," my father added, surprising everyone by deviating from the traditional toast, "who has shown what a true heiress can accomplish in the business world." The perfect example of family loyalty. Sophia smiled uncomfortably, clearly caught off guard by being included in what should have been my moment. And in that instant, I made my decision. "Speaking of my amazing sister," I said, stepping forward with a bright smile, "I wouldn't be here without her support. She deserves a proper toast, too." In fact, I held out my champagne flute toward her. "This special reserve champagne father selected is too good not to share. Take mine, sis, I insist." Before anyone could react, I had pressed my untouched glass into Sophia's hand and smoothly taken her already partially drunk glass. My father's face froze in a mask of horror he couldn't publicly display, while my mother's knuckles went white around her own glass. "To family," I declared, raising Sophia's safe champagne while looking directly into my father's eyes. Confusion flickered across Sophia's face, but social training took over. She smiled and raised my champagne glass. "To family," she echoed, and drank deeply from the poisoned glass. I sipped from her original glass, never breaking eye contact with my father. His face had gone ash, and a thin sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead as he realized what had happened. My mother glanced rapidly between Sophia and him, her practiced smile becoming brittle at the edges. The moment passed. Guests applauded, conversations resumed, and the orchestra began playing again. I circulated through the crowd, making small talk while keeping Sophia in my peripheral vision. Guilt and fear battled within me. I hadn't had time to think of another solution. But I had just allowed my sister to drink poison meant for me. The dose was supposed to be non-lethal, according to what I'd overheard. But what if my father had lied to my mother? What if Sophia reacted badly to whatever it contained? 34 minutes after the toast, it happened. I was speaking with one of my professors when I heard a gasp from across the room. Sophia had been speaking with one of the firm's junior associates when she suddenly pressed her hand to her forehead, swaying slightly. "I feel strange," I heard her say, her voice slurring uncharacteristically. "Really dizzy suddenly." I pushed through the crowd just as Sophia's knees buckled. The associate caught her awkwardly as she slumped forward. "Help," he called. "Something is wrong." My parents rushed over, genuine panic in their eyes now that their golden child was affected instead of their disappointment. My father reached her first, cradling her head as she began to mumble incoherently. Her skin had taken on a grayish tinge, and sweat beaded on her forehead. "Call an ambulance," my mother shrieked, all composure abandoned. Dr. Lewis appeared at my side, his medical training kicking in as he checked Sophia's pulse. "Her heart rate is elevated and irregular," he reported, loosening her collar. "What was she doing before this happened?" "She just had champagne at the toast," the associate answered. "She seemed fine." Then suddenly, my father's eyes snapped to mine, realization and fury mixing with pure fear. I stared back unflinchingly. "The ambulance is on its way," someone announced. 5 minutes out. I knelt beside Sophia, taking her hand. "Stay with her," I told my parents firmly. I'll go downstairs to direct the paramedics. They nodded distractedly, all attention on Sophia, who had begun to tremble slightly. In the privacy of the elevator, I pulled out my phone and called Taylor. Meet me in the lobby right now, I instructed. Bring your phone with the recording. It's an emergency. Taylor and Zoe were waiting when the elevator doors opened. Sophia collapsed, I explained rapidly, walking toward the entrance. I need you to give a copy of that toast recording to the paramedics and tell them I suspect poisoning. Then send me a backup. Poisoning? Zoe repeated, horrified. What the hell is going on, Danielle? I'll explain everything later. Please, just trust me. The ambulance sirens were audible now, growing closer. When the paramedics arrived, I approached the first one. My sister has collapsed upstairs. Symptoms include dizziness, disorientation, irregular heartbeat, and tremors. I have reason to believe she ingested a toxic substance in her champagne. The paramedic looked at me sharply. You suspect poisoning based on what? I'm a biochemistry graduate. The symptoms presented suddenly about 30 minutes after consumption. Before I could finish, my parents burst from the elevator, with Dr. Lewis supporting a semi-conscious Sophia between them. The paramedics rushed forward with a gurney, their training taking over as they quickly assessed her condition. Please help her, my mother sobbed, her mascara running. She just collapsed. BP 90/60 and dropping, one paramedic reported. Pulse 120 and irregular. As they loaded her into the ambulance, my father turned to me, his voice low and dangerous. What did you do? Nothing, I replied calmly. She drank from my glass. Remember the special champagne you selected just for me? His face contorted with rage and fear. You switched the glasses deliberately. You knew what, father? That you put something in my drink? Why would I think that? I held his gaze steadily. Unless you did. She needs family with her, a paramedic interrupted. One person can ride along. I will go, my mother insisted, already climbing in. We will follow in the car, my father said, grabbing my arm painfully. All of us. The ride to Northwestern Memorial Hospital was tense silence. My father drove while I sat in the back seat, Taylor and Zoe having promised to meet me there. My phone buzzed with a text from Taylor, videos sent to your email, showing you clearly switching glasses after your father handed you one. What do I tell the police when they arrive? Police? Of course, there would be police if poisoning was suspected. I texted back quickly, tell them everything you saw. Show them the video. In the emergency room, chaos reigned. Sophia had been rushed into a treatment area, with my mother wailing dramatically to anyone who would listen about her precious daughter and how she just collapsed for no reason. I approached the nurse's station directly. I need to speak with my sister's doctor immediately. I have reason to believe she ingested a toxin, and I may know what it is. The nurse looked skeptical until I added, I'm a biochemistry graduate specializing in pharmaceutical compounds. Please, time might be critical. Minutes later, I was speaking with Dr. Patel, the emergency physician treating Sophia. Your sister is experiencing symptoms consistent with anticholinergic poisoning, she explained. Elevated heart rate, confusion, dilated pupils, dry mouth. We're treating her. Symptoms while running toxicology screens. You need to specifically test for cyclopenthane derivatives, I said. My father works with modified versions at Harris Pharmaceuticals. They're testing a new class of compounds that wouldn't show up on standard tox screens. Dr. Patel's eyebrows rose. That is a very specific suggestion. Why do you suspect this particular compound? I took a deep breath. Because I believe my father intentionally added it to my champagne glass, but my sister drank from it instead. Her professional demeanor didn't change, but she reached for the phone. I need to contact the police. Within an hour, the emergency room had transformed into a crime scene. 2 detectives interviewed staff, while a uniformed officer stood outside Sophia's treatment room. My parents had been separated for questioning, my mother loudly protesting the absurd accusations, while my father demanded his attorney. I sat in a small consultation room with Detective Rivera, a serious woman with kind eyes that belied her no-nonsense demeanor. Walk me through what happened again, she requested, taking detailed notes. I recounted everything, From the overheard conversation, to seeing my father place powder in my champagne, to the split-second decision to switch glasses with Sophia. I have biochemistry training. I recognized the symptoms when they started. I never thought he would use something potentially lethal, but I couldn't be sure. And why would your parents want to poison you? She asked carefully. Money, I replied simply. Control. My grandmother left me a trust worth approximately $12 million that activates next week. If I died before then, it would revert to my parents. They also recently discovered their pharmaceutical company is under FDA investigation, and they believe I might have information that could harm them. Detective Rivera's expression didn't change, but she wrote something and underlined it. That is a serious accusation. I know, I said quietly. I have the video my friend took of the toast. You can clearly see my father giving me a specific glass and my decision to switch with Sophia. You can also interview Dr. Lewis, who is aware of tensions within the family and the company. A knock at the door interrupted us. Dr. Patel entered with a tablet in hand. We have preliminary toxicology results, she announced. We found elevated levels of a modified anticholinergic compound, similar to but not identical to cyclopenthane. It appears to be a research compound not yet in commercial production. Detective Rivera looked between us. In English, please. It's a laboratory-created drug that would cause symptoms mimicking severe food poisoning, but with additional cardiovascular effects, I explained. Exactly the kind of compound Harris Pharmaceuticals has been developing. Only someone with access to their research facilities would have it. Will she be all right? I asked Dr. Patel anxiously. We are administering physostigmine as an antidote, she replied. Her condition is serious, but stable. If we had not identified the compound quickly, there could have been permanent heart damage. I closed my eyes briefly, relief washing over me. Thank you. When I opened them, I found Detective Rivera studying me carefully. You realize that by your own admission, you knowingly allowed your sister to drink what you suspected was poisoned champagne. My stomach dropped. First, I didn't know what else to do in that moment. I needed evidence. I thought it was just enough to make someone sick, not life-threatening. My voice shook slightly. I made a terrible decision, and I will have to live with that. Before she could respond, the door burst open, and my father stormed in, followed by a flustered officer and a sharp-looking man in an expensive suit. This is outrageous, my father shouted. My daughter is clearly mentally unstable and jealous of her sister's success. She has been making wild accusations about our family for years. Mr. Harris, I must ask you to step outside, Detective Rivera said firmly, standing. Joseph Harris, do not say another word, the suited man instructed, placing a hand on my father's arm. I am Gerald Thorne, the Harris family attorney. My client has no comment at this time. Your client is not under arrest yet, Detective Rivera emphasized the last word, but I suggest he cooperate fully. We have video evidence of the champagne toast and preliminary toxicology reports confirming a research-grade pharmaceutical compound in Sophia Harris's system. My father's face went through a rapid series of emotions before settling into cold fury. Danielle has always been troubled, he said, his voice suddenly calm and reasonable. She was jealous of her sister, resentful of our expectations. She has threatened before to destroy our family business out of spite. That is not true. I protested. We indulged her environmental science whims, despite her responsibilities to the family company, he continued, as if I had not spoken. We even threw this expensive graduation party to show our support. And how does she repay us? By creating this elaborate drama and allowing her own sister to become ill. Gerald Thorne placed a business card on the table. Detective, we will cooperate fully with your investigation, but any further questions should come through me. The Harris family is prominent in this community, and we expect discretion. After they left, Detective Rivera picked up the card with 2 fingers, as if it might be contaminated. Interesting family you have, Miss Harris. You have no idea, I replied wearily. A commotion in the hallway drew our attention. Dr. Lewis had arrived and was arguing with the officer outside Sophia's room. I am her family physician, he insisted. I need to review her treatment. Detective Rivera and I stepped out as Dr. Lewis spotted me. Danielle, thank God. What happened? They're saying Joseph tried to poison you. Before I could answer, Dr. Patel emerged from Sophia's room. She is asking for you, Danielle. She is still groggy but lucid. Entering the dimly lit hospital room, I felt a wave of guilt seeing Sophia connected to monitors and within 4 in her arm. Her normally perfect appearance was disheveled, her skin still holding an unhealthy pallor. Her eyes fluttered open as I approached. "Hey," I said softly, taking her hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," she replied, her voice raspy. "They told me." "Is it true? Did Dad really try to poison you?" I nodded slowly, tears filling my eyes. "I am so sorry you drank it instead. I just reacted. I didn't think." "Why?" she whispered, confusion and pain clouding her eyes. "Why would he do that?" "The trust from Grandma Lillian. The FDA investigation. They were afraid I would expose contamination at the West facility." Understanding dawned in Sophia's eyes. "The sealed reports. The ones they've been keeping on the secure server." She squeezed my hand weakly. "I saw them last month but didn't understand what I was looking at. Heavy metal readings, disposal records. They've been dumping research waste directly into the watershed for years." A soft knock interrupted us as Detective Rivera entered with another plainclothes officer. "Miss Harris, we have just received some additional information I thought you should know. The FBI has been investigating Harris Pharmaceuticals for the past 6 months for fraud, environmental violations, and falsification of clinical trial data." I stared at her. "The FBI?" "Yes. Your parents were already under surveillance. When we contacted them about the poisoning incident, they shared that they have substantial evidence of criminal activity. They have just executed search warrants at your family's offices and home." Sophia's monitors beeped as her heart rate increased. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I signed off on some of those documents. Joseph said they were routine regulatory filings." "We will need to speak with you about that later, Miss Harris," the other officer said to Sophia. "For now, focus on your recovery." As they left, Sophia began to cry quietly. "I trusted them completely. I defended them whenever you complained about how they treated you. And all this time." I held her hand tightly. "You didn't know. They manipulated both of us, just in different ways." "What happens now?" she asked, fear and uncertainty replacing her usual confidence. "Now, we tell the truth," I replied simply. "All of it." The story broke in the Chicago Tribune 2 days later. Pharmaceutical CEO and wife arrested for attempted murder of daughter. Smaller headlines added, FBI uncovers massive fraud and environmental crimes at Harris Pharmaceuticals. Our family name, once synonymous with success and philanthropy, became overnight shorthand for corporate greed and familial betrayal. I moved temporarily into Taylor and Zoe's apartment, unable to face returning to my own place where reporters lurked. Sophia remained in the hospital for 4 more days before being released into the care of our Aunt Patricia, my mother's estranged sister, who flew in from Seattle upon hearing the news. I always knew Eleanor was capable of terrible things, Aunt Patricia told me over coffee in the hospital cafeteria. But I never imagined this. I should have stayed in touch with you girls. The investigation expanded rapidly. With search warrants in hand, the FBI discovered a trove of incriminating documents at both the Harris offices and our family home. Emails detailed systematic falsification of safety data for 3 major drugs currently on the market. Environmental testing showed years of illegal toxic waste disposal that had contaminated groundwater in communities near the West facility. Detective Rivera kept me updated on the poisoning case. The lab confirmed the compound was an experimental anticholinergic from your father's private research facility, she explained during one of our meetings. He had signed it out personally 3 days before your graduation. We also found notes in his home office detailing dosage calculations. I worked with the authorities, providing everything I knew about the company's operations and my parents' behavior. Days blended together in a haze of police interviews, meetings with prosecutors, and checking on Sophia's recovery. A week after the incident, I met with Special Agent Donovan from the FBI at his request. He spread photographs across the table between us. "Do you recognize this location?" I studied the images of what appeared to be a storage unit. Inside were boxes of documents, several laptop computers, and, most disturbingly, vials of various compounds carefully arranged in temperature-controlled containers. "No," I replied. "I've never seen this place." "It is a storage unit rented under your name," he said, watching my reaction carefully. "Opened 6 months ago with what appears to be a forged signature." My blood ran cold. They were planning this for months, setting me up in case their original plan failed. "It appears so," Agent Donovan agreed. "We found evidence on your father's computer of multiple contingency plans. The poisoning attempt was actually Plan C. Plans A and B involved more elaborate setups that would have implicated you in corporate espionage and data theft." As the case built, more family secrets emerged. Financial records revealed my parents had been siphoning company funds into offshore accounts for years. Former employees came forward with stories of being fired after raising safety concerns. 3 families filed lawsuits claiming their loved ones had died from side effects that Harris Pharmaceuticals had deliberately concealed during clinical trials. Through it all, Sophia and I grew closer than we had ever been. The golden child facade crumbled as she processed her own sense of betrayal and manipulation. "I was their puppet," she admitted during one of our long talks in her recovery room. "Everything I did was to please them. My whole identity was built around being the perfect Harris daughter." "You were also their shield," I pointed out gently. "As long as you were the successful, obedient one, they could dismiss me as the problematic child, rather than questioning their own behavior." 2 weeks after the incident, we received word that our parents were being held without bail after the judge deemed them flight risks due to their substantial overseas assets. Their preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. On the morning of the hearing, Sophia and I met for breakfast at a quiet cafe far from the courthouse. She still moved carefully, her body not fully recovered from the poison. "Are you ready for this?" I asked, stirring my untouched coffee. "No," she admitted. "But we need to be there. I need to look them in the eyes." The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters who shouted questions as we approached. Inside, the hearing room fell silent as we entered, all eyes turning to observe the poisoned daughter and the targeted one. Our parents sat at the defense table, both dressed impeccably, despite weeks in detention. My mother's eyes filled with tears when she saw Sophia, but my father stared straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge either of us. The evidence presented was damning. The prosecution displayed the video of the toast, showing clearly my father giving me the specific glass and my subsequent switch with Sophia. They presented the toxicology reports, the compound trace matching exactly to samples found in my father's private lab. Financial records demonstrated the motive, my trust fund that would have reverted to them upon my death. Most shocking to the spectators was a recorded phone call my father had made from detention to a business associate, asking him to clean up the situation with those river samples, and mentioning that Danielle was always the problem child, never understanding family loyalty. When the judge ruled there was more than sufficient evidence to proceed to trial on all counts, including attempted murder, my mother collapsed in theatrical sobs. My father remained stone-faced, only his clenched jaw betraying his fury. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed again. Sophia surprised me by taking my hand and addressing them directly. "My sister and I are cooperating fully with authorities. We ask for privacy during this difficult time as we come to terms with our parents' betrayal." "Thank you." As we pushed through the crowd toward our waiting car, a reporter called out, "Did you know your sister was switching the glasses? Were you part of the plan?" Sophia stopped cold, turning back with unexpected fire. "My sister saved my life. Our parents tried to poison her. And when she realized it, she had seconds to decide what to do. She has carried unnecessary guilt for my suffering, but the only people responsible are Joseph and Eleanor Harris. They were willing to kill their own daughter for money and to cover up their crimes. That is the story you should be telling." In the following days, more family members we had barely known reached out, cousins, distant aunts, my father's brother, who had been ostracized from the family decades ago for whistleblowing on an earlier pharmaceutical scandal. It seemed our family tree was filled with similar stories of control, manipulation, and retribution against anyone who challenged the Harris way. Sophia and I began the painful process of separating ourselves legally and financially from our parents. We hired our own attorney, a kindly but razor-sharp woman named Vivian Santos, who helped us navigate the complexities of our situation. "Your grandmother's trust is secure," she assured me during one meeting. "The trustees have accelerated the transfer given the extraordinary circumstances. As for Harris Pharmaceuticals, that is more complicated. I don't want anything to do with it," I stated firmly. Sophia nodded in agreement. "Neither do I. But we have a responsibility to the employees who were not involved in the criminal activities and to the communities affected by the contamination. There is also the matter of your parents' personal assets," Vivian continued. "Much will likely be seized by the government or directed toward victim restitution, but there will still be substantial holdings that would typically pass to you as their only children." I looked at Sophia, seeing my own conflict reflected in her eyes. "We need time to think about that," I said finally. As summer progressed, the case against our parents strengthened. 3 former Harris Pharmaceuticals executives agreed to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. Environmental testing confirmed widespread contamination attributed directly to improperly disposed research chemicals. The estimated cleanup costs exceeded $100 million. In August, 2 months after the graduation party incident, Sophia and I returned to our childhood home with FBI agents to identify additional documents and evidence. Walking through the silent, imposing rooms felt surreal. Everything looked exactly as it always had, perfect, cold, and sterile. In my father's study, agents were carefully cataloging the contents of his safe. "Miss Harris," one called, holding out a small leather journal. "Do you recognize this?" I took it carefully. The journal was old, the pages yellowed. Inside, I found my grandmother, Lillian's handwriting. It was a record of her own discoveries and concerns about Harris Pharmaceuticals from decades earlier. The final entry, dated shortly before her death, read, "I have arranged for Danielle's financial independence. She alone has the conscience and strength to break the cycle of this family's poison." Tears filled my eyes as I showed it to Sophia. "She knew," I whispered. "She was trying to protect me all along." "And you protected me," Sophia replied, squeezing my hand. "That's what real family does." 6 months after that fateful graduation party, I stood on the porch of my grandmother's lake house, watching the November sun shimmer across the water. The property had been part of my inheritance, a peaceful retreat 2 hours outside Chicago that I had visited often as a child. Now it was my home, at least temporarily, as I figured out my next steps. The trust had been officially transferred to me 3 weeks after the incident, the trustees agreeing unanimously to expedite the process given the extraordinary circumstances. The first thing I had done was establish a separate fund for Sophia's ongoing medical care and therapy. Though she had physically recovered, the psychological wounds ran deep. "Hot chocolate delivery," called a voice behind me. Sophia emerged from the house, carrying 2 steaming mugs, bundled in one of my oversized sweaters. She had moved in with me a month ago after selling her downtown condo, too full of memories of family business dinners and parental approval. "Perfect timing," I smiled, accepting the mug gratefully. "I was just thinking about how much has changed." "Everything," she agreed, settling into the Adirondack chair beside mine. "Remember when we used to come here with Grandma Lillian? She would let us stay up late watching the stars while telling us stories about women scientists who changed the world." "I remember Mother hating those trips," I laughed softly. "She was convinced Grandma was filling our heads with dangerous independence." She was right about that, at least. Sophia's smile turned contemplative. "The prosecutors called this morning. They're offering a plea deal." My hands tightened around the warm mug. "What kind of deal?" 20 years for father on the attempted murder charge, plus the environmental crimes. For mother, if she testifies about the corporate fraud. She paused. "They want to know if we object." I stared out at the lake, watching an eagle circle lazily above the water. "Do you?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants them to face a full trial, to have everything exposed. But another part just wants it to be over." I finished for her. "I understand." We sat in comfortable silence, a new dynamic for sisters who had spent most of their lives as strangers occupying the same family space. The past months had forged a genuine bond between us, built on shared trauma but expanding into real friendship and trust. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Lewis. Environmental job interview went well. They were impressed by your research proposal on pharmaceutical waste remediation. Call me for details. I smiled, showing the message to Sophia. After the dust had settled, I had begun reaching out to environmental science firms specializing in industrial contamination cleanup. My biochemistry background, combined with my environmental focus, made me uniquely qualified to work on pharmaceutical pollution specifically. It felt right, using the Harris knowledge to heal some of the damage my family had caused. Sophia had her own healing journey. She had resigned from Harris Pharmaceuticals immediately after being released from the hospital and had spent months helping authorities understand the company's operations and identifying which executives had been complicit in the crimes. Now she was considering law school, inspired by the prosecutors and victim advocates she had met through our case. The house is being seized next week, she mentioned, referring to our childhood home. They wanted to know if there's anything personal we want to retrieve first. I shook my head. Nothing I need there. What about you? I already took the photo albums, she replied. The real ones, not the staged family portraits Mother kept in the living room. The candid ones Nora used to take. Nora had been our housekeeper for 15 years, the closest thing to a loving maternal figure we had experienced daily. Have you heard from Nora? I asked. She's in Florida with her daughter. She sent me a care package last week with homemade cookies and a note saying she always knew we would break free eventually. The criminal proceedings continued their slow progression through the justice system. Our parents maintained their innocence publicly, while their attorneys negotiated frantically behind the scenes. The evidence was overwhelming, with new details emerging regularly as former employees came forward. Most painfully, we discovered through corporate emails that our parents had known about the environmental contamination for over a decade. Communities downstream from the factory had experienced elevated cancer rates and birth defects, information my parents had systematically suppressed through confidential settlements and manipulated studies. I channeled my anger into action, establishing a foundation with part of my inheritance, dedicated to providing healthcare and environmental testing for affected communities. It couldn't undo the damage, but it was a start toward making amends for the Harris legacy. The media gradually lost interest in our story as newer scandals emerged, allowing us precious anonymity to rebuild our lives. I began volunteering with a water quality monitoring program at the lake, finding healing in the simple act of protecting something beautiful. On a cold January morning, exactly 7 months after the graduation party, Sophia and I sat in the courtroom as our parents accepted their plea deals. They looked smaller somehow, their designer clothes replaced by muted business attire, their imperious demeanor diminished by months in detention. My mother wept quietly as the judge detailed her crimes, while my father remained stoic, his eyes fixed on some middle distance. Neither of them looked at us, their daughters, sitting in the gallery. When asked if they wanted to make statements before sentencing, my mother declined through her tears. My father stood, and for a brief moment, I thought he might express remorse. Instead, he spoke about his lifetime of contributions to medical science and how he had always done what was necessary to protect the family business. He described himself as a victim of changing regulatory standards and expressed hope that history would judge him more fairly than this court. Not once did he acknowledge the communities his company had poisoned, the patients harmed by falsified drug safety data, or his attempt to murder his own daughter. In his mind, he remained justified. A man who had merely done what was necessary. As the bailiff led them away to begin their sentences, I felt a complex wave of emotions, sadness for what our family could have been, anger at their continued refusal to take responsibility, but predominantly, an overwhelming sense of relief. It was finally over. Outside the courthouse, away from the small cluster of reporters, Dr. Lewis waited with Taylor and Zoe, my chosen family, who had supported me unfailingly throughout the ordeal. "How are you feeling?" Taylor asked, hugging me tightly. Free, I replied simply. Like I can finally breathe. In the months that followed, Sophia and I continued our separate but intertwined healing journeys. We sold most of our parents' personal assets, directing the proceeds toward a victim compensation fund. I accepted the position with the environmental remediation firm, focusing specifically on the cleanup of the Harris West facility site. Sophia began her first semester of law school, determined to specialize in environmental law and corporate accountability. We kept the lake house as our shared refuge, a place that held happy memories untainted by our parents' influence. Sometimes we would sit on the dock, talking late into the night, processing our complicated grief for the family we had lost and the one we had never really had. Do you think you'll ever forgive them? Sophia asked me one evening as we watched the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. I considered the question carefully. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word. I've accepted what happened and who they are. I've released the anger because carrying it was only hurting me. But forgiveness feels like it requires repentance from them, and I don't think they're capable of that. She nodded thoughtfully. I keep thinking about nature versus nurture. Were they born this way, or did something make them like this? And either way, what does that mean for us? It means we have choices, I said firmly. Their blood runs in our veins, but their values don't have to run in our hearts. We get to decide what kind of people we become. A year after the graduation party, I stood at a podium addressing a conference on pharmaceutical environmental impact. As I discussed innovative approaches to remediation, I caught sight of Sophia in the audience, proudly recording my speech on her phone. Beside her sat Dr. Lewis, Taylor, Zoe, and a growing circle of friends and colleagues who had become our support system. The journey had been painful beyond imagination. But standing there, I realized I had found something I had never experienced in the Harris household: genuine belonging. Not based on compliance or achievement or genetic connection, but on mutual respect, shared values, and authentic care. My parents had seen me as a problem to solve, a threat to eliminate. They had tried to poison not just my body, but my spirit, my independence, my very sense of self. In choosing to fight back and refusing to become either victim or villain in their narrative, I had discovered my own strength and purpose. The inheritance my grandmother left me was valuable, but her true gift had been believing in my capacity to break the toxic cycle. That faith had saved my life, and now it was shaping my future. This journey taught me so much about what family truly means. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to cut ties with toxic family or redefine what family means to you? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of survival and renewal. Remember, the most powerful antidote to poison is truth. Thank you for listening to my journey.